Shabbat Shalom, everybody. So this week's Parsha, Ki Tissa, includes the infamous incident of the golden calf. We've just received the Ten Commandments. We've learned all about the injunction not to worship false idols. And we had our minds blown by the whole synesthetic experience of divine thunder and wonders at Sinai. But now we seem to do a total 180 and forget our faith and commitments to God completely. Let's take a look at some of the Pesukim that tell this story. Thank you so much, Devorah, for all of your screen sharing wonders. Can I have a volunteer to read in the English? Mary Rita, go for it. Thank you.
Thank you. All the people took off the gold rings that were in their ears and brought them to Aaron.
Sorry. Can we go one slide back? My apologies.
Okay.
There we go. Here's where the story begins.
When the people saw that Moses was so long in coming down from the mountain, the people gathered against Aaron and said to him, "Come, make us a god who shall go before us, for we do not know what has happened to Moses, the man who brought us from the land of Egypt." Aaron said to them, "Take off the gold rings that are on the ears of your wives, your sons and your daughters, and bring them to me."
Okay, pause. Thank you so much, Mary Rita. So when the people saw that Moses was so long in coming down from the mountain, they are scared. They are having trouble with object permanence, with understanding that if they don't see someone or something for a little bit, it might actually still be there. Now, let's see what happens next. Mary Rita, will you continue reading on the next slide?
And all the people took off the gold rings that were in their ears and brought them to Aaron. This he took from them and cast in a mold and made it into a molten calf. And they exclaimed, "This is your God, O Israel, who brought you out of the land of Egypt." God spoke to Moses, "Hurry down, for your people whom you brought out of the land of Egypt have acted basely."
Thank you, Mary Rita. And I'll chant this last pasuk in the Hebrew for you just to get a taste of how it sounds. Vaydaber Adonai el Moshe, lech red ki shichet amcha asher ha'eleta me'eretz Mitzrayim. Okay, God is not pleased. We can take down the slide now. Thank you, Devorah. So, the people are worried. Is Moses dead? Is God real? Does God still care about us? We're feeling abandoned in the desert yet again. The ancient Midrash, or as some like to call it, rabbinic fan fiction, explains Aaron's collusion with the people's mistrust in God by saying he had us build the calf as a compassionate way to channel our nervous energy and bide time while we were waiting for Moses, and to prevent us from giving into perhaps violent Lord of the Flies-esque urges in our panic and maybe even killing Aaron. You may have noticed I'm using the pronoun we as I talk about this, and there are a few reasons for that choice. One is I'm practicing embodying the Torah in preparation for Pesach, when we're commanded to remember that we were all strangers in Egypt and we were all personally redeemed, and each of our souls stood at Sinai. Another reason why I'm using the pronoun we as I explore this text is I think it can be too easy to look at these Israelite characters building the golden calf and say, wow, that is so ludicrous. Why would they think that's a good idea? But actually, we all do equivalently irrational things in our own lives when we're at the end of our rope and panic sets in. When we feel alone, when we don't know whether the universe will come through for us in the ways we're so desperately seeking, when it's hard to remember that the events of our lives may be tailored for our learning and growth, and deep down we have the strength for whatever comes. When it feels like just a nightmare of endless waiting and unknowns, in moments like those, we all have a tendency to reach for our equivalent of the golden calf. It may be scrolling on our phones, trying to distract our minds from whatever they're preoccupied with and inevitably filling them with a whole new batch of worries. It may be traipsing back to the kitchen for just another perusal of the cabinet and fridge, seeking temporary comfort or numbing through food. That is a go-to for me, I will say. It may be contacting people whom we know on some level can't help us or might even exacerbate our pain, but whom we reach for out of habit. It could be really any habit of self-sabotage. So whatever your golden calves may be, please know you're not alone. We all have them. It is really, really hard to be human, and we come up with whatever coping strategies we can from a fairly young age. Not only are we worthy of compassion for these self-sabotaging patterns, I want to suggest they may actually be transformed into gateways to our awakening. If we can receive them like a mindfulness spell, we notice we're going into that pattern. Let's consciously notice we're getting pulled into a compulsive behavior, and then slow down enough to offer ourselves some love and deep breaths instead. Maybe, just a thought. Now, this might help us return to our center instead of a moment when we're getting tugged to stray further. The Talmud Bavli in Yoma 86b says, Gedola teshuva shezidonot naasot lo chezohiot. Great is teshuva, meaning return or repentance, for our harmful inclinations can be transformed into merits. The later Hasidic masters explain that the deepest falls contain within them the sparks of the highest return. Rabbi Nachman of Bretzlav, who I really love, writes about Yerida letzorech aliyah, that we sometimes plunge down into the depths in order to ascend. Now, let's break our identification with the Israelites for a moment and think in us and them terms rather than we terms, just for a moment. Again, in some ways, it may seem easier for us to have mercy on ourselves with our own versions of idolatry in this unimaginable modern day and age than to pardon the Israelites for building a calf back there in the desert. Their lives seem comparatively simple, and they've experienced divine revelation firsthand in ways we can only imagine. So why can't they maintain their faith for 5 minutes? And if they can't do it, how on earth are we supposed to? Didn't they just see that whole light show on the mountain, and aren't they being fed out of the sky, for heaven's sake? But just as a plunge into the depths can bring us up into ascent, so can a peak spiritual experience, like what the Israelites have had at Har Sinai, at Mount Sinai, bring us down into the depths in the aftermath. How many of you have been to an amazing retreat or had another super meaningful, life-giving, even perhaps revelatory experience, and then felt kind of depressed afterwards? I want to share a source from the Piazetzna Rebbe, otherwise known as the Rebbe of the Warsaw Ghetto, on this topic. Devorah, can you pull up that table? Thank you so much. And is there anyone else who would like to take a turn reading in the English? Dana, thank you so much.
Sometimes when a person merits a great awakening and enthusiasm in the service of God, afterwards everything falls away and they become cold and dry. Then the evil inclination tells them all of it was an illusion and you have no more hope. This is the great test, that a person should not create for themselves a new idol, but should hold fast to their faith even when they feel nothing now. Sometimes the concealment is so great that a person thinks God has completely abandoned them. But in truth,
Even
over
there, God
there,
is present. Thank you, Dana. So just taking a moment to let that sink in. Sometimes the concealment is so great that a person thinks God has completely abandoned them. But in truth, even there, God is present. Thanks, Devorah. You can take that down. So keep in mind, the Piazetzna Rebbe wrote this while living in harrowing ghetto conditions. He tried to encourage his Hasidim, his followers, and he continues to encourage us to this day to look for the divine even in states of the deepest concealment. I'll share with you all personally, I'm very pained by the ongoing war and by the reality of my half-siblings, my dad's 4 other kids who were born and raised in Israel, running to bomb shelters. And at least they have shelters to run to, which most people across Southwest Asia don't have. And in so many parts of the world where there's this kind of violence. But I'm trying to find sparks of the divine wherever I can, and one place where I consistently find them is here, in our sacred community, in our Shabbat practice, and in our mutual witness and care. I have one last tidbit of Torah for you today. Midrash teaches that when Aaron asked us to bring our golden jewelry to melt down and create the calf, the women refused. While the men wanted to manufacture a sense of certainty, the women were somehow more able to remain in the mystery. We're taught that the reward for the women's faith was to receive Rosh Chodesh, the celebration of the new moon, as a monthly time when women get to not work. How about that? It is significant that the moon seems to disappear completely and then slowly returns at the time of the new moon. Much like Moses on the mountain, much like the elusive comforts we chase after in hard times. God's presence is not always evident to us, but the women at Sinai understood that divine light can temporarily wane without being lost, or at least it can appear to wane. So the moon becomes a symbol of their faith. It strikes me that the moon is the locus of our calendar and of Jewish ritual observance in so many ways. This clear sensory metaphor for the waxing and waning, for divine hiddenness and revelation, for the cycles of our fear and of our fulfillment. I'll close this drash with a song, Ve'afilu behastara, coming from the words of Rabbi Nachman. And Devorah, do you mind pulling up those lyrics for us? Even in a concealment within a concealment, the Holy Blessed One is certainly there. And behind the difficult things that stand before you, it's cut off, but the last line is, I stand, I stand, I stand. Ve'afilu behastara, shebetoch hastara, bevadai gam sham, nimsa Hashem yitbarach, ve'afilu behastara, shebetoch hastara, bevadai gam sham, nimsa Hashem yitbarach, gam me'acharei advarim hakashim ha'omdim alecha. Will you go back a slide? Sorry, Devorah. Ani omed, ani omed, ani omed. God thank you all for continuing to seek divine sparks alongside me, even in concealment. And may we continue to find and feed those sparks each day. And Yah, please grant us the strength to catch ourselves when we're pulled towards our own personal golden calves, and to redirect ourselves towards deep breath, deep faith, and emotional nourishment instead. Shabbat Shalom.